Hello,
Hi,
hello. Hey, Tina, how's it going?
how are you? Good.
I'm well, I'm well. I hope I got a good enough connection here. I'm at the park in Medford here.
I think yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Great, great.
Happy season. It sounds like you've been super busy on your farm.
Yes, indeed. Definitely have. Yeah, we just got a bunch of hemp in the ground, about 5 acres of hemp. So
Wow.
it's been really, really busy time of year. We've been working on the drip line, trying to get that in. Fortunately, we were blessed with some rain, some unexpected rain, so
Mm.
that was really a blessing and really a savior, really, because we're a little bit behind on getting our drip lines in. This is some of the bigger acreage farms that I've worked on, so it's things that would be a small task on a smaller farm become a giant task, when you scale it up.
Yes, yeah. So it's new to you to do this acreage, and it's also new to you to scale up on Korean natural farming, right? There's this new to you on
Yeah.
that level, so lots of that.
Definitely, yeah. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today. Was really the last 2 years of my trials with KNF and Jadam, more on a larger scale, working with commercial cannabis and hemp farms.
Perfect. Yeah, because everyone, I think that's a very prevalent question is how, it's great, this is great and all, but how do you scale up? How do you scale up? And you need to
Right.
prove the system.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's very. I've learned that it's a very systematic approach. It doesn't make sense to pick dandelions on your lawn if you have several acres to work on. So really for me it's come down to only a few herbs that I'm working with on 5 acres of hemp, because I'm very sensitive also to the wild crafting techniques we use, being sustainable with our wild crafting practices, having a reverence for the wild places. To truly be regenerative, we need to be sustainable and careful about the way that we're approaching nature and harvesting.
Absolutely. And so, yeah, definitely we're going to talk about that. And maybe as an intro to people who may not know about you, I'm fascinated and feel sort of in alignment with
Hmm.
you that you just got a host of different kinds of trainings and knowledge going for you. You're an herbalist, you practice alchemy, you are
Hmm.
a permaculturist,
Hmm.
correct? And then
Yes.
you added Korean natural farming to the mix. So can you just go briefly
Yeah.
into a little bit of your history and what brought you to this place?
Sure. Yeah. You know, in a past life, I guess you could say I was an architectural draftsman working at a desk job, and did that for over a decade. And in 2009, the economy collapsed. I found myself out of work and kind of wondering, well, what's next? I kind of had the American dream, owned a house, had a nice car, all the things, kind of did what I thought I was supposed to do, and it collapsed. And so that set me on a whole new kind of course in life. I was living in Salt Lake City, Utah at the time. So I bought a sleeping bag and tent with my last paycheck and kind of was hiking around through the foothills and camping, and learned about, and nettles and elderberries, and found that I could sustain off of these plants alone. Uh, and from there, you know, I'll just shorten this story, but I ended up in Japan. I had a Japanese girlfriend at the time, so I moved to Japan. And the first day I got there was the day that the tsunami happened. So,
Wow.
yeah, that was my entrance into living in Japan and dealing with natural disaster and a lot of instability in city life. So what it really did for me was catalyze thinking about like living more sustainably, and how in society maybe we're not doing the best job of that. So from Japan, when I went back to the States, I had an opportunity to move to Humboldt County. My sister had been living there for like 20 years, her and her partner. And so I went out to Humboldt County. From there, I had the opportunity to work on many cannabis farms and medical cannabis farms, living off the grid. A year of that time I spent living in a tent in the Lost Coast, really isolated from a lot of civilization and people, and just kind of got to spend time, communing with the forest and learning about the plants. And then I got into so really that's what drove me into, permaculture ideals, which led me into finding about Korean natural farming. And so yeah, I owe a lot to Humboldt County for taking me in and really teaching me sustainability and regenerative farming. And so from there, I was kind of offered work in Southern Oregon for some bigger farms doing this commercially. I was offered a gig a couple of years ago with a company to come out and show them how to do Korean natural farming on a large scale, which was very attractive to me because I had done it on smaller scales, even indoors, and seen a lot of really great results with it. But
Yeah.
this was an opportunity for me to scale this up and show that it worked on a large scale, which I did, and really, ever since I found KNF, I've never gone back to other styles of farming. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so were you able to find results from that first year of scaling up, like right away that first year? Was it?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So the farm that I got to in Oregon, it was 2 tier 2 grows. So it was about 2.5 acres of cannabis. And when I got there, there's a lot of clay soil in Southern Oregon, a lot of volcanic pumice and clay. And when I got there, the soil was horrible. It was, I wouldn't even call it soil. Really, it was clay. It looked like the desert, cracks in the desert.
Caliche.
Yeah, exactly. Very hydrophobic. No life in the soil. No worms. No topsoil really. And so the first thing I did was I came in and I did a heavy mulch, and I did a very heavy application of JMS, Jadam microbial solution, alternated that with lactic acid bacteria. And over the course of 3 months, the winter time, the wet months, totally transformed the soil there from being hard clay, hydrophobic, holding no water, to really beautiful soil that, was holding water, that had life in it, that had worms. So,
What was the size of that application? Did you, so the mulch layer, was it like, how deep did you go on that first year?
Not too terribly deep. We just did a straw layer, and only about half inch of straw, I'd say, across the top. Yeah.
Okay.
And we were blessed with a lot of rains, and so basically I would alternate. 1 week I would do JMS, Jadam microbial solution. The next week I would do lactic acid bacteria, and between the two of them,
as a foliars.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was drenching.
I mean, not foliars, drenching. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, so I was soil drenching, and yeah, it was amazing to me to see how just in 3 months you could really transform clay, hard, cracked hydrophobic soil into really beautiful living soil.
Yeah.
So we did. Yeah, and so we saw a huge transformation in, the health of the plants. Was really, really amazing.
Very cool. All right, so that kind of, so then how did you get into your situation now, and what are you? Yeah, we can launch into what you're wanting to share.
Great.
What you're doing now.
Yeah, so I'm primarily working with hemp now, but I also grow, I'm an herbalist, and I grow a lot of perennial herbs, annual herbs, and work with a lot of different herbs. So I have a passion for growing herbs and veggies as well, but primarily I'm working full time on 2 hemp farms at the moment, and consulting on some other hemp farms up in Bend and around Oregon. So stepping back to the story where I came out to Oregon to work for this company, I at one point the company got absorbed by a larger company, and I had some ethical dilemmas with that and teaching Korean natural farming to these big scale companies. So I was fortunate. I left that company, and now I'm working with some smaller my partners on some smaller, hemp projects. So hemp is primarily my focus, and that's what I'm using the Jadam KNF practices on really right now.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So are you finding that the ups, like scaling up has, okay, how do I ask this? Is it like, is the sweet spot of application applied large scale seem to be in, is there a range between like 3 to 5 acres, or where does it change? Where does the scale up seem to shift from maybe not so sustainable to ideal? Are you finding a sweet spot?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I would say, once you get into above a couple of acres, when you're doing 5 to 10 acres, things really start to change. So, for me, I can make inputs for the most part to be able to cover that. But what gets tricky is finding, say, like, herbs, plants to do fermented plant juices, doing like a totally traditional style Korean natural farming approach. So I would say, above that 2 acreage, once you get up into like, 5 to 10 and above that, things really start to change. And it's like, so where do you find enough, plant tops to make FPJs for that kind of scale?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's really narrowed down to really only a few herbs that I'll work with. And so the thinking that I really use these days, I was really inspired by a workshop I went to with Master Cho and Youngsan Cho Jadam out in Williams, Oregon. They came last year. And so this idea of growing your own fertilizer, like taking a part of your crop, and so thinking ahead of time and thinking like, okay, I'm actually growing a percentage of my crop for fertilizer. So that's something that really I took to heart last year, and I was so inspired by that idea that, we had 4 greenhouses that were 100 by 30 full of hemp. And I convinced my partners, it wasn't easy, but I convinced them to chop down a whole greenhouse because we had time to replant, and we used all that biomass to make FPJ, fermented plant juices, and Jadam liquid fertilizers from 1/4 of the hemp that we were growing.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was really inspired by that. And so the theory there being that, if we look at nutrient cycling in nature and how, leaves are defoliating, dropping their leaves and creating a mulch layer, and that is creating a protective zone for all these indigenous microorganisms to thrive, and start breaking that down and then nutrient cycling that back to the plant. So it's really the same idea. We are using that plant because it is in turn the best analog for that plant. And I had a moment where I was sitting with Master Cho, and we were on a farm. I'll just call it a tomato farm. So I'm sitting with Master Cho, and I asked him, they were growing some dynamic accumulators such as comfrey and some other herbs. And I asked him, I said, so Master Cho, would you, in this situation here, would you harvest this comfrey, this great dynamic accumulator, to make fertilizer out of, or would you use the plant being grown here? And he said, oh, always use the plant you're growing if possible. So that
it makes sense. All the ratios are there.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a perfect analog for itself.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so I really took that to heart, and so now I put a lot of thought ahead of time as far as like trying to grow my own fertilizer. So before we even have to go out into nature to wildcraft, we can be thinking about, okay, I can grow a certain percentage of my own fertilizers here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you said you were able to harvest that in time for a second harvest, for a second planting. Was there so they must have been fairly young plants, and then did you take the whole plant, or did you just take the tips for the fermented plant juice and then use the rest as a JLF? What was the process for that?
Yeah, so we did both actually. The plants did get to be about about 3 feet tall. So we planted pretty early in the season, and we still had enough time that we could put in some plants, some starts we had, and still get a good yield off that second round.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah, so we harvested that 1 full greenhouse of hemp. I did go in and I made fermented plant juices with all the growth tips. And then I took the rest of it, including the roots, the whole plant, chopped it all down into IBC totes, and made a liquid fertilizer, Jadam liquid fertilizer out of the rest of it. So none of that hemp was wasted whatsoever. We used all of it, the roots, everything.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And then were you able to apply that JLF same season, or is that something that you would carry, would you carry that into the second season?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I found, working with different plants, making Jadam liquid fertilizers, certain plants will break down faster. And so, hemp and cannabis takes a bit more time. I did end up using some of it towards the end. And this year we're using some of that fertilizer from last year too. So I gave it about 5 weeks to really break down, and then started using that. So,
wow. Cool.
Different herbs though will break down much quicker in a Jadam liquid fertilizer. Plants like this, for instance, purslane here.
What is that? Oh yeah.
Purslane. Yeah. So purslane is an all-star. This is one of the top recommended herbs that Master Joe talks about for making fermented plant juices. It's a dynamic accumulator, and it also has alkaloids that enhance the color and flavor of your crop. So the cool thing about purslane is when you do a liquid fertilizer with purslane, it will break down in liquid in 10 days. So that's pretty awesome. This will fully liquefy and turn into a liquid ferment in 10 days time when you put that in water with, a handful of leaf mold and inoculant in there, some IMO. You can break that down into a really great fertilizer. Another one I'd like to mention, so these are some of the herbs that I am using on a large scale because they're abundant and they're very nutrient dense. So another one in that category I'd like to mention is skunk cabbage. And I found a ton of skunk cabbage here in certain areas, and it also it has some great terpenes in it. And so really what we're looking for, as you well know, Tina, is we're looking for those plants that are vigorous growers that kind of dominate the landscape. Those are generally what we look for when we're making FPJs. And so to me, skunk cabbage is a perfect example of an FPJ plant because it's just huge, vigorous, large plant. And so it's basically showing us that it is packed full of growth hormones. So that's really what we're looking for when we're looking for the FPJs. And like the purslane in a liquid ferment, that skunk cabbage will break down in less than 2 weeks. It's completely liquefied, completely micronized, ready to use.
Beautiful. Okay. What are you using in ratio? Are you using it, how are you using the JLF?
Yeah, good question. So this kind of gets into how I'm intermixing Jadam and Korean natural farming, because for me, I found it really hard to make enough FPJs to really do kind of the traditional approach to Korean natural farming. So what I'm doing is I'm alternating in Jadam liquid fertilizers in place of fermented plant juices. I still use fermented plant juices, but I'm also alternating in the liquid fertilizers. And so, you know, and in Jadam, they kind of give a broad spectrum of application for the liquid fertilizers. Like I was reading this morning, you know, anywhere from 20 to 300 dilution ratio for like per slain. So what I've been doing is I usually do about 1 to 100. So I'll do that in place of a fermented plant juice if I don't have a fermented plant juice on hand.
Are you using it in concert with the OHNs and all that, or are you using it strictly? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So you're subbing it in.
Yeah, subbing it in.
Cool.
Yeah. So I have also done just strictly JLF applications as well. But yeah, lately I've been subbing it in for FPJs when I don't have FPJ on hand. So a few advantages too of the liquid fertilizers is that, you know, well, first of all, you don't have to buy a bunch of sugar. And secondly, you know, you don't have to just use the growth tips, you know, like we do in fermented plant juices. You can really use the whole plant. I will actually do different blends for different stages of the plant growth. So I have like a flowering blend that I'll use. And so that one, I'll just tell you what I use, what's showing up for me here in Southern Oregon. So I'll do a Jadam liquid fertilizer. And this is what I would do for, say, a flowering ferment here. So wild carrot, Queen Anne's lace, this is in flower right now. Really has some nice volatile compounds going on. Also teasel. Teasel shows up everywhere, really vigorous grower. Been using a lot of teasel in my liquid ferments. Chicory. Chicory was brought here from Europe as a cattle feed. It's a great dynamic accumulator, high in a lot of elements and minerals. Really love to use chicory in liquid ferments as well. And let's see. Yeah, so that's generally what kind of shows up in and around the farm that I'm sourcing that's abundant, you know. So I'm not going out, you know, taking, say I have like a hedge of nettle in the corner of my farm. I'm not going there and totally, you know, desecrating that whole stand so that it's not going to grow back next year. I'm really looking for, well, I should mention blackberry too. You know, blackberry is one of the invasives that really shows up in the Pacific Northwest and many other places. There's no shortage of it, and it's packed full of growth hormones, enzymes, all that good stuff. So let's see.
Are you harvesting it through its cycle, like getting its new growth, and then later, like, are you doing different stages of harvesting?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. So with blackberry, for instance, I'll do an initial harvest when, you know, early spring, when you're just seeing those new growth tips coming off the plant.
Yeah.
I'll harvest that for a vegetative FPJ. And then I'll wait for the blackberry to go into bud. When it gets those nice white buds, we're just kind of past that stage here in Southern Oregon, and it's they went to flower now. But that budding stage, the budding
like
and flower,
right at that that vigorous, like it's just ready to pop kind of thing. Is that
exactly. Yeah. So I would harvest at that stage for that transitional stage, you know, when our plants, so when our plants are transitioning from vegetative to now flower, they're going through that process. And so that's when I would harvest the blackberry buds. to give some of those transitional hormones and enzymes and all that stuff. So then the final stage of the blackberry would be harvesting the fruit, which you
Yeah.
could use in a fermented fruit juice for, you know, the later stages of plant growth.
Now, are
So,
you, so when are, you know, when are you using your, this is an aside, but when are you using your fermented fruit juices? Like I'm not using them till super late, and I'm
yes.
curious if I shouldn't,
Yeah.
right. Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's the same that I use them. Only, you know, about the last month of growth for cannabis and hemp is when I'm using them. Definitely, yeah. Just only for the real finishing, you know, the flavor enhancing and
Yeah.
all that good sugar, you know, giving that to the plants. So yeah, really only in the last stages there.
Now, are you using soil drenches all the way through on a large scale, or are you
Mm.
doing any kind of foliars? Like when do you do that? When do you transition and all that?
You know, I primarily I found that doing foliars, this is another way of kind of scaling up. We're pretty lucky. We just got some fancy equipment. So we got this like orchard tractor that's only like, you know, 4 feet wide that has sprayers like that go up to about 7 feet high, and they have 3 sprayers. We just got this. I'm super stoked. This will be
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah. Really stoked to use this. It's it'll be nice to kind of like get through the rows. It's you know, it's good because you can get through really tight spaces in your rows. And so for hemp fields, you can kind of get in there and we'll plant, you know, 3 rows, and then we'll have basically a 5-foot road for our tractor to get through that has our sprayers on it. This is brand new, so I'm really excited to be using that for our KNF and Jadam foliars.
Yeah.
But generally what I do is I use like an atomizer or backpack sprayer, and I have been doing a lot of foliars that way in like our greenhouses. So I do drenches, but you're going to use a lot more inputs that way as well.
Yeah.
So, you know, a way to kind of scale up and conserve some of your inputs and make them go a little further, I found is through foliar sprays.
And do you carry your foliars all the way through bloom, or is there a point when you don't?
Yeah, so we have a light dep going right now that's a couple weeks from harvest. I just did, generally towards the end, I like to do, well, the old term flush from like, you know, back in the day from, you know, indoors and using like salt-based newts.
Yeah.
I don't like to really use that term anymore, but yeah, I do soaks towards the end of the final stages. I don't like to do. I cut off foliars about 2 weeks before harvest. I find
Yeah.
that, yeah, you know, I find that you're just introducing more moisture into the phytosphere. Like you can cause, you know, mildew, mold, botrytis, and maybe damage some of the trichomes too if you're, you know, spraying too heavy. So generally, like, yeah, I just I'll do soil drenches the last few weeks.
Yeah, but I carry a little, I carry it past the 5th weeks into 6 weeks
Okay.
quite often. So
Yeah.
I was
Nice.
curious. I've heard that some people don't do it that far in, but I've not found a problem with it. But yeah, way deep into bloom, I'm not gonna. Yeah, same reason. So that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
So talk about harvesting, and when you're wild harvesting for things. Let's get into the etiquette around
Great.
around
Sure.
harvesting.
Yeah, great. I'd love to get into this topic. So I have some formal training in herbalism. Had a year course that I did in Humboldt County with Dandelion Herbal Center. Was really fortunate to go through that program. And Jane Bothwell, my teacher, she's you know, very very close with Rosemary Gladstar, which the course also, I took Rosemary Gladstar's course as well, Sage Mountain. So I was able to work, actually use KNF practices at Dandelion Herbal Center to pay for my tuition for herbalism class. So that really worked.
Nice.
Yeah, that worked out great.
That's stacked functioning for you.
Right, yeah, multi-stacking functions, permaculture for sure. And so, anyways, there's a lot of etiquette involved in wild crafting and in approaching the natural world. And so, so when you walk into a natural place, like, you know, into nature, we need to be really mindful of the space we're in and how we're approaching wild crafting. I was always taught to, first of all, ask permission and always bring an offering as well. So you never go out just with the intention of taking, like you're always giving something back too. So an offering, you know, tobacco is used a lot as an offering, but really anything, a piece of chocolate, just putting the intention out of like gratitude and, you know, and not just walking into nature and like, I'm here to take. So I was always taught, you know, ask for permission. And a lot of times you can talk to the plants and say, I would like to harvest you, say, for a certain reason. And so give that intention out. But, you know, listen for feedback. What is your intuition telling you from these places that you're in, asking to take? So let's just say that you do get good feedback, and so then I would only, let's say there's a stand of nettle, okay, and I would only, first of all, for say FPJs, we really only need the top, you know, 3 to 4 inches for those growth hormones. So we don't have to rip out all those plants, right? We can just take the tops off them to let them regenerate. And so we don't have to rip those plants out. We can just take the tops of what we actually need. Now, I would only harvest about, at tops, 40% of what I'm seeing. I would always leave more than half of what I'm seeing. So I'm not going in and I'm not just like destroying a whole stand of nettles, or, you know, just as an example, nettles, because, you know, this term regenerative, right? We don't just want it to be a catchphrase. We want to live these principles and practices. And so we want to assist in regeneration. We can actually, wild crafting, you can be really destructive, or you can actually assist in the growth and health of these wild places.
Yes. Yeah, they thrive by our attention and by our harvesting if we're in coordination with the living system that it's part of, right? Which is
absolutely
incorporates the reciprocity and the listening and the intuition as well,
Yes.
and that we have the responsibility to attune ourselves to being able to listen to what the messages are, and that it's a real thing. I know it's a spot question, but do you have any sort of like magical moments out there harvesting when you've gotten a message or some kind of intuition about what you're doing that's kind of led you down a path? Do you have a specific moment? I know that's putting you on the spot. I have them too, but I can't recall them.
I do. So another one of the herbalism schools that I've gone through is the School of Evolutionary Herbalism, which is
I'm so jealous.
Sage Apothecary, who's an amazing herbalist and you know, alchemist, spagyricist. That was kind of my entrance into, you know, spagyric alchemy, which is herbalism, you know, alchemical herbalism. So, you know, he talks about this idea of you know, heart coherence, and so we can actually communicate with plants by doing plant sits and sitting with them. And if we open our hearts like to this intuitive faculty, right? It's not this mental, like today in this day and age, there's a lot of emphasis put on the logical reductionistic science mind, right? But the intuitive heart is really important when we're working with nature, when we're working with plants. Plants are electromagnetic receivers and transmitters, and we can tap into those frequencies with our heart if we're able to listen. And so, well, one story I'll give you is Devil's Club, Oplopanix, is a really powerful plant used by many of the indigenous tribes of the Pacific Northwest, and it's a very, very powerful medicine. And so I was on this quest to find Devil's Club. I was really stoked and interested to find Devil's Club, and I know it grows around the Columbia Gorge, basically kind of northern Oregon up into Washington and up into like BC and even into Alaska. And then it also, for some reason, it has like a cousin that grows around Lake Michigan, so it's out there too.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is, huh? So the third coast, right? So anyways, with the Devil's Club, I'm not going to give the specific location because it's really special to me, but
sacred.
So I'm driving. Okay, so I was over in Eugene, and I was giving a talk on pre-natural farming at a permaculture convergence that happened there. And so I was heading over to Bend to a friend's farm afterwards and heading through the Willamette National Forest. And I stopped by at a local waterfall, and I had kind of given up on my search, thinking that, okay, I got to go up to like the Columbia River to find this plant, and I had kind of given up on my searches like that south of Oregon, more central Oregon. So I go to this waterfall, and like I'm walking down into this ravine and like look up, and it like literally knocked me over. Like the power of this plant like put me on my back, you know, because it just has these huge like maple looking leaves. It's such a powerful plant, and like the power of that, like it really, like I fell back and it just sat there with this plant in awe of like, I found you and I can't believe it. Like I've been looking for a long time. And so yeah, that's a very special plant. I've made some spagyric preparations of this plant, and just very, very special. It's been called like Alaskan ginseng. It's kind of a term that's not officially accepted, but it's closely related to ginseng.
Beautiful.
And so it works on a lot of different levels. You know, with herbs, you can learn a lot about herbs by their flavors. You know, like bitters work on your digestive system. Different, you know, sweet herbs are very nutritive. So you can learn a lot about herbs and what their function is physiologically, really by the flavors. And so Devil's Club is just all over the place, super complex flavor. So anytime you have a really complex flavor of a plant, you know it's working on a lot of different levels.
You must have ingested it. Is it did you have some effects from it that you especially loved?
You know, it's very heart opening. It's very it's a very self-empowering herb. You know, I think for doing self-work and growth and things of that nature. And I think shamanically, this is also what tribes of the Pacific Northwest use this herb for as well. So really, that's kind of the level that I use it. I see it as a very sacred
deep
plant.
And ceremonial.
Yes, absolutely.
That's gorgeous. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have? I'd love to hear one of your experiences with an herb. Maybe that spoke to you.
Well, I'll talk about one that's been speaking to me this year. Very surprising discovery, because I actually had bought it and planted it and then just kind of noticed it popping up around the property, because what I'm trying to do here is naturalize everything, and it takes about 3 years, and it'll present, but then it'll go away, it'll present into the second year, and then by third year it's like massive, and then by fourth year it's found its place. Usually it seems to be the pattern. So this plant was, I bought it, I planted it, even though I knew it's indigenous, I still seeded it here, but it's wild lettuce, actually.
Oh yeah.
So this is the first year that I've actually like,
Lactuca canadense. I love that plant. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I stumbled on, because I make leaf protein, which I'm going to get into at some later time, but I found out about that through my permaculture studies. It's a way of isolating the proteins in the plant. So I started out with this plant. I finally, so in weeding, I'll take the plant. I'm actually harvesting. I'm not weeding. So I set it aside, and I decided to pull protein from it. I tried the protein, and it had an effect. And then I decided I realized that what was left still had a lot of oiliness and sponginess to it. So I thought, and I don't tend to follow recipes. I let the plant tell me what to do.
Yeah, right. That's awesome.
So I realized, like, this isn't water soluble. So I put the mass of stuff that I'd already juiced, taken the protein out of it, put it in alcohol. The alcohol turned the most lovely color of blue I've ever seen.
Oh, wow.
Like blue-green. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I tried a bit off of it.
Yeah.
And the effect was incredible. Like, it acted on the central nervous system. It got rid of pain. It definitely, but it sort of woke me up to the reality that because I've had issues sleeping for the last year, and that's unusual for me. But I wasn't really being affected in any other way. I thought I was behaving normally. Well, this plant taught me that I am super jacked in my central nervous system, and that I need a lot of nurturing. This plant has opened me up this year to sort of being able to surrender deeper, being able to feel at home in my own garden, being able to feel safe in my own environment, and do some profound healing.
Awesome.
And and it's like plant guided.
Yeah, isn't that so cool? I love that. That's like the initiatic properties of plants. That's really what Spagyrics gets into. It's like all different plants. Like, you get into the archetypes, and there's lessons that these plants have to teach us.
Each plant, I know.
Yeah, it's so cool, so cool. Actually,
I want to send you some of the tincture.
Oh, I loved some. Okay. Yeah,
I owe you in time. You sent me. Preston sent me some stuff that saved my hemp crop last year, because I needed some. Anyway, you did.
I felt really bad because the bottle, like, you sent me a picture of the package, and it was like crushed and like, maybe a quarter of the way full. It was all, the box was drenched.
Right. But ironically, it was the perfect amount that was left to finish out my harvest. So it was the universe saying, yeah, you might have wanted more, but this is what you're going to work with. And it's perfect.
Nice. Yeah. I love to talk about that specific plant that I sent you too.
Please do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to get into that right now, or?
Yeah, we might as well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Great. So, the plant that I sent to Tina was California Bay Laurel. That's Californica umbellularia. Umbellaria, excuse me. And it is a very, very potent plant. It has a compound called umbellulone, and it's one of the volatile oils of California Bay. And so how I came upon this plant and how I thought about using it as a pesticide, like a Jadam pesticide, was through my herbalism studies. I was looking at some of the Native American uses of California Bay, and the uses that I found was um, it was used to protect acorns. Like when some of the native tribes were processing acorns, they would put California Bay around the acorns to protect that acorn meal, because there's a process of leaching out those tannins in acorns to produce bread. So they would protect it with the California bay leaves to, keep away insects or opportunistic, whatever from getting the acorns. So when I heard that, I was like, okay, this has potential for, Jadam, a Jadam pesticide. And sure enough, it definitely does have way more potential. I've been using this as my primary go-to for all kinds of problems. For example, last year when I first got to the hemp farm I'm currently working with, there was a horrible infestation of hemp aphids. And so I had some of the California Bay. I made a Jadam herbal solution, which is essentially an herbal decoction that you do with water. Just boil it, steam it, trap all those volatile oils, and then you would mix that with the Jadam wetting agent, which is essentially a Castile soap. And so I mixed the two together and found that perfect rate to where we had a bunch of ladybugs, that came to save the day too. So I was trying to find that perfect balance of, okay, where can I destroy like all of the hemp aphids, but also save the lady beetles and their larvae. So, and I found that balance. And so we had this crazy infestation of hemp aphids. And the first application I used of the California Bay Laurel with the wetting agent took care of most of the problem. I mean, probably 80% of the aphids were gone after one application.
True.
The second application, I came back a week later, sprayed again, totally done. 2 applications, and they were toast. So I've also used the Bay Laurel for powdery mildew, botrytis, russet mites.
Yes.
Wendy was talking about that application this year at the regenerative conference. And basically our trials, your trials went, Tina, and Wendy's as well with the California Bay Laurel. So it is an absolute all-star. So I only use a couple of other herbs for pesticides. I'll use like bracken fern, ginkgo biloba is one of Cho Young San's favorite. But it's just not as potent and effective, I found, as the Bay Laurel is just an all-star.
So Chris is asking, Chris Trump has joined the room. He says, have you used the JWA by itself?
Yes.
I think he was trialing that just this last week. So
yeah, I have. Specifically for hemp aphids, I didn't find that it took care of the problem. It does help. I mean, even with normal aphids, you can just spray them off with water, and it doesn't kill them, but you at least kind of make it disrupt their flow. And so I have used the wetting agent by itself, but I haven't found that it will kill all the aphids. When you couple that with the Bay Laurel,
the Bay Laurel is amazing.
Now we really got a powerful weapon to use against them, and it was amazing because it didn't kill the ladybugs either. They were thriving.
That is so cool to hear.
And I can talk about the ratios that I used.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, so let's see here.
Because I have it written down what I used, and I found the same thing to be true. It took 2 applications, and also just to comment on the power of using Korean natural farming or natural farming methods in conjunction with all this is that, like, it gave the plant a break from the onslaught enough time for the application or for what it was getting from the natural farming applications to just come rushing forth. So they both act in just concert with each other, which was very evident.
Right. Yeah. So,
I love you too, Chris. We love you. I'm glad you're joining. I'm glad to see you here. He just said he loves us both.
Oh, love you too, Chris.
I love the community that is happening around natural farming. It's like community happens the best and the most lasting when we're actually doing things that are helpful and that are truly helpful. And then when we're abundantly helpful to ourselves and what's around us, then we're abundantly helpful with each other, which is it's just this natural outflow happens. And
definitely. Absolutely. It's such a great community, and what I find is really cool is just, people sharing their experiences, being open source with, these practices in a different region, because I've been fortunate to practice this, go around and train in Hawaii and go to, practice in California and Oregon and out in Idaho with Chris and the Soil Smiths. And it's so cool to see how, those different leverage points, and how it changes. So, it's a different approach wherever you're at. It's going to be a little different. I think that's really important to keep in mind. We don't want to get too fixed and
So we were going to talk about your ratios. We might as well cover that. And we got another hour.
Yeah.
And then if we can go 3 hours, whatever, I don't care.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So the ratio that I'm using for the California Bay Laurel with Jadam wetting agent, I use this for dealing with hemp aphids, and found that it also saved the ladybugs and their larvae. So that ratio was a half ounce of the Jadam herbal solution. So essentially, just to go over that for people unfamiliar, that's a decoction of bay laurel. You essentially take all the leaves and you would simmer that in a covered pot, and you would make a strong herbal decoction from that. So, you'd bring it to boil and let that simmer I usually let it simmer for hour and a half or so to get all those good volatile compounds out of it. And then you have your decoction, also known as Jadam herbal solution, and you can mix that with your carrier, which is the JWA, the Jadam wetting agent. So again, the ratio on that is a half an ounce of the bay laurel Jadam herbal solution, the decoction, and I would mix 2 ounces of the Jadam wetting agent per gallon. And so I found that really worked awesome for dealing with hemp aphids, and again, saving the lady beetles. So that's kind of the balance you're looking for. And what you can do is just pull a leaf off, create a little laboratory wherever you're at. Just pull a leaf off your crop that's infected with whatever you're trying to combat, and then you can just mix these solutions to find the appropriate ratio that's working.
So you're basically treating some infested part and then looking under a microscope or a magnifying glass to see the effect on the population, and then going with that ratio.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
And also it's important, right, to use I made it in with just using spring water, which is heavily mineral, but no, you want to use it in
acidic. Right. That's a good point. You have to use rainwater is what I always use, because it's more acidic. If you use a more alkaline water, then it's not going to mix correctly. And if you're making liquid soap, such as Jadam wetting agent, a liquid Castile soap, you have to also use more acidic water. If it's too alkaline, it's not going to work.
And a good visual in case you don't have a pH around is, or if you don't know what water you're using, is when it's cloudy, it's not, that's alkaline,
Yes,
but when it's more clear, it's more acidic. So you can know that way, right?
exactly. Yep, that's true.
Cool. And it does make a difference.
Big difference. Yeah,
Yeah.
big difference. Yeah, it won't mix correctly. You'll see, like when
Yeah.
you have it mixed properly, you'll see bubbles form. Whereas when you don't, it becomes cloudy and it doesn't look the same. So yeah, you definitely know when you've made correct, soap.
Very cool. So do you ever use the JWA in, or have you, what are your thoughts on using it in concert with like applications of, type 2 or type 3? Do you feel like, because so I just did a type 2, which is using the fish amino acids, and I had so much oil that I
Hmm.
ended up adding a little of the JWA just to get the oil to mix with the water a bit. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's kind of a adulteration,
Um,
or is that
no,
okay?
no, like I'm open to that kind of experimentation. I don't think it's adulteration. I just haven't personally had a need for that. I know some people are scraping the oils off of their FAA. I generally keep
Okay.
my FAA. I keep it. I like to keep it whole. So I like to keep those
Yeah.
oils in there.
Yeah. So you
Um,
just shake it up while you're applying, and
yeah, exactly. Yep. So I haven't really experimented with using oils of fish in that way, that
yeah.
approach. But if it's working for you, then yeah, I
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I just did it this last time. I don't know if it's
Cool.
working or not.
Okay.
I just want to know if
Yeah.
you knew. If you knew.
Yeah, I've been so stoked with my results with the bay laurel and the wedding
Yeah.
agent. It's such a powerful combination that honestly I don't even really look for other herbs to really use. And there, I'd like to say this much. Okay, so at the regenerative conference this last year, there was a speaker, and I'm not going to name names or, throw anybody under the bus, but there was a speaker talking about pesticides, and she mentioned that a petroleum based product was less of a had less of an environmental impact than using certain herbs, and she was totally putting down the use of herbs as pesticides. And I was just like mind blown, like what, this lady is talking about this at a regenerative conference, basically saying the environmental impact of harvesting herbs is greater than using some petroleum extracted product. Okay, so we have to
Well,
be
it
careful.
seems.
Yeah.
Let's call it out, because this to me is one of the major conversations that needs to happen out there for us to sort of wake up to our regenerative place in the world. I feel
Hmm.
like there are basically two camps of people. There are the people who feel like we are part of nature and that our place is necessary here, that we're part of the ecosystem, and then there are people who are being convinced and taught and believe that people are the problem.
Mm.
And so like for instance in wild harvesting and wild
Mm.
crafting, it's been shown that like if you're doing proper harvesting and you're keeping to that 40% ratio that you spoke to earlier,
Hmm.
that stand of wild plants will actually flourish and thrive under your stewardship and care.
Mm.
And so
Yeah,
if we come into proper stewardship with our planet, we are very much a part of the garden. In fact,
absolutely.
like
Yeah.
essential to the garden.
Right.
So
Right.
I feel like, yeah, maybe making the argument that us harvesting and wildcrafting is going to be harmful is it's just, it's because we need to learn how to come into harmony with our world.
Yeah, I agree. And it could be like if we go back to like devastating that stand of nettle we were talking about, then it
Yeah,
could be destructive. But
right.
I think the argument is very hard to make that a petroleum extracted product is less damaging to the earth than using
Yeah.
herbs. And for me, it comes down to bay laurel again. It's like these massive trees grow in Northern California. In Oregon, it's known as Oregon myrtle. It's the same plant in
Oh,
Oregon.
cool.
Up here we have our own name down there. It's California Bay Laurel. But anyways, so I mean, these trees grow massive, and it's so potent. Like, you don't need much. Like, a branch of this, I can make enough to spray 4 greenhouses, 100-foot by 30-foot, and take care of an aphid infestation with one branch off of a huge tree.
That's
So there's not much
beautiful.
of an environmental impact going on there.
Yeah.
And
Now,
I'm doing this on a large scale too.
do you think that you're losing? I mean, I'm sold on the method because it works so well, but have you ever thought about like being a spagyrist, capturing the essential oils first, and then sort of using a spagyric approach of like adding those volatiles back into? Have you done much?
Interesting you ask. Here, here is the sulfur or the essential oil of bay laurel, and so
that's beautiful.
now I'm doing distillations of you can see the bubbles there.
That's gorgeous.
So
did you have to open your windows and doors to do that, or
yeah? Oh, that's another thing I should mention. If you're working with bay laurel, you do not want to do this in your house. I mean, there's a reason it's a powerful pesticide, and it is very, very powerful. I mean, it's actually one of its nicknames is a headache tree because it gives umbellulone, that volatile oil, causes headaches in a lot of people.
Okay.
I'm fortunate it doesn't for me. I absolutely love the smell of bay. But this is really powerful stuff.
Now, so how much material did it take to do that?
Yeah, so this was this much here.
Yeah.
Was I'm working with 2-liter distillation apparatus.
That's what I have.
Okay, cool, nice. So this was let's see, like two distillations. So my bioflask, essentially this is 2 distillations of 2 liters of bay laurel. So honestly, like, not all that much. It's very high in these volatile compounds, and they're very powerful. So I am experimenting now with doing distillations and adding straight essential oils into my Jadam wetting agent, rather than doing the herbal decoction. But the herbal decoction works really well too.
It's plenty, right? Are you going so far as to burn to white ash and add the minerals or anything like that crazy stuff?
I haven't done like a spagyric application for the plants, but I think it would be very effective. I really do. Yeah. It's just
where I want to use it. Where I want to use it is in the vinegars.
Yeah.
So after making the FPJs, taking that plant material, making the vinegar, and then taking the leftover plant material, taking it to white ash, deriving the minerals, and putting it back into the vinegars.
Yeah.
But then it's going to change the pH. So I'm kind of like, anyway.
Right.
We'll have another discussion about spagyrics one of these days.
Yeah, we should, because that's a deep rabbit hole right there, and it's a very exciting method, and very ancient roots into antiquity. So
what's your feeling on the relationship between spagyrics and natural farming? Because I see them kind of like pretty hand in hand. Are you caught by that?
I've often wondered, some of the approaches to Korean natural farming do have some alchemical kind of background, and I think one of them that strikes me is the preparation of OHN. For instance, we do a fermentation before we actually do a tincture, and so that's very similar to how you would approach a spagyric too. In a spagyric, you would release the sulfur or the essential oil first, the soul of that plant, and then you would do a fermentation to release the spirits. So in Korean natural farming, we are doing fermentation along with our distillation. So it's similar to the alchemical approach for sure. Yeah. We're not taking it as far as calcinating down the plant matter and adding the salts back to it, but there are elements of alchemy within Korean natural farming. Is definitely, an esoteric science.
Yeah.
And I know, I believe one of Master Cho's teachers was really inspired by Rudolf Steiner of biodynamic farming. And, he was very much into alchemy.
Interesting. Yeah, it's fun to explore the interface. So have we touched on everything that that's in your outline? Preston prepared an outline for this. I was so thrilled with that. So I want to know
well, I did. However, I've been bouncing all over the place, not really using it. So I guess I could go back and just kind of talk more about, my favorite herbs as far as FPJs.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So, as I was talking about earlier, the idea of really trying to grow your own fertilizers. So part of your crop, thinking ahead of time, like how many, like if we're doing acreage, phone battery is getting kind of low here. Okay. I'm going to talk fast.
Okay.
I might have to go plug in here.
You want to try to do that? Or what do you want to do?
Yeah, I'm going to make my way over and plug in while I'm talking here.
Yeah, let's do that. Because we don't want to lose you.
Okay.
Because we'll distill all this stuff down talking about Spagyrics. Like my intent for these conversations is to gather as much material as possible and then condense down later and come out with, some kind of a podcast that we can all use together. So we want to make sure we get all the information from you that you wanted to share.
Yeah, so I would be thinking first and foremost about growing some of your own fertilizers. So that would be on my mind first. Secondly, I would be looking for plants that are really showing up for you, that are in abundance, different plants that are possibly invasives in your area that are taking over. They make great fertilizers. Things like fennel, really juicy horsetail, fennel, comfrey. They make great fertilizers because they render a lot of juices. Yeah, somebody's asking about seaweed FPJ. Seaweed FPJ is awesome, definitely, because it's very abundant if you live on the coast. And excuse me, I'm just plugging in real quick. So yeah, seaweed FPJ, it's very abundant. So I like to look for, herbs, plants like that are very abundant, because there's never going to be a shortage. So seaweed FPJ is awesome. I also like to do, Jadam style liquid ferments with seaweed. That can be really fun too. So let's see. Look at my list.
Are your horsetail, are you making a traditional FPJ out of that? And are you find that to be a juicy plant?
Oh, absolutely. It renders one of the most juices out of a lot of the FPJs that I make.
Nice.
So right now it's getting more mature. So as the name implies, it looks like a horsetail. The leaves kind of fray out and it looks like a horsetail. The best time really to harvest it is before it does that, when the shoots are just coming right out of the ground, before it opens up. And there's a ton of juices in horsetail. So it's one of my favorite FPJs because, let's just compare it with nettle. What I was finding from nettle FPJ to horsetail FPJ, I would get about twice the juices from horsetail that I would nettles. So being strategic about what we're harvesting too for large scale, nettle is a lot of work it makes a great FPJ, super nutrient dense, but it's a lot of work to harvest for making large scale FPJ fermented plant juices. So So I like to use skunk cabbage because it's very abundant. It's very juicy. Fennel, again, is awesome. Also very abundant on the coast. Very juicy. Comfrey, growing comfrey makes a great FPJ. Also renders a lot of juice. So really there's only, for larger scale stuff, there's really, to me, it's even using nettle. It's like I do make nettle FPJs, but I'm very careful with my application of those. I'll use them in a foliar spray because, you know, it's just so hard to render a lot of juice from it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is
What's your
where
application rate? I mean, what's your how much material are you using per acre typically?
that's a great question. Like material as far as making FPJs.
Yeah, like how much are you having to harvest per acre? Do you have that number, or do you know?
I haven't done those calcs
Yeah.
because for me, as I mentioned earlier, I'm substituting in Jadam liquid fertilizers as well.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's hard for me to say. You know, I do pickle barrel batches of nettle and horsetail. So you know, I'm able to, I have about 10 gallons of you know, nettle FPJ, and horsetail I get about 10 gallons from the same amount of material. So
Gorgeous. Okay.
you know, I'm using that very carefully in foliar sprays. I do some soil drenches, but primarily I'm using the foliar sprays to help make that go further. And then, as I mentioned, substituting in the Jadam liquid fertilizers is also, I find that to, yeah, it's easier to make Jadam liquid fertilizer than it is fermented plant juice. There's more resources for it. You essentially just chop up, you know, grasses and weeds and whatever you have, and throw it in a ferment in water, and you have a fertilizer. So it really simplifies it. You don't have to go buy a bunch of sugar. So anyways, yeah, I like the combination of the two.
Nice. What are you doing for your vinegars? Are you making your own vinegars from your material from your FPJs? Or are you using brown rice vinegar? Or?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I love
Nice.
making vinegars. I love,
Yeah.
in Korean nacho farming, I'm always joking, and it's not really a joke. It's true, but like the byproducts of Korean nacho farming are cheese and wine and vinegar. You know? So,
Gorgeous.
so I love that. And so with the spent, you know, the FPJ solids that are left over after your fermented plant juices, yeah, you can make vinegars from those. You can throw it in a tub full of, you know, so 1 part plant with like 2 parts water, and some, usually there's enough extra sugar that you'll be all right. You could toss some extra sugar in there, and then you could pitch like a kombucha or a Jun SCOBY in there. That really kickstarts the process. I use Jun SCOBYs with all my vinegars. Made some really nice like mugwort vinegars and nettle vinegars. You can also make wines, you know, which would essentially, it's the same thing, only you would do an anaerobic ferment rather than aerobic ferment for the vinegars, anaerobic for the wine.
Do you
So
throw extra yeast in there?
yeah, I do pitch my own yeast. Yeah, I mean, theoretically, you could pitch some local material, some plant matter, some fruit, and inoculate with a local yeast. But I usually kickstart, like, primarily I'm using a Jun culture for all my vinegars. And then, so to take that a step further with these plants, so let's say we made fermented plant juice of mugwort, let's just say. So then you would collect your juices, you'd have those solids, you can make a wine or vinegar out of those, all right? And then when you're done with that, what I'm doing with those scraps now is I'm actually making a mixed compost. And this year I made, with all my food scraps, I did a mixed compost with all my spent vinegar and FPJ solids, and then all my food scraps. And I was amazed at, I did this mixed compost pile with all that layered in, you know, cardboard, and did kind of a lasagna with IMO sprinkled in, and soaked my cardboard in lactic acid bacteria, and just
Oh,
kind of
wow.
did layers, and created the most beautiful compost that I'm going to make an IMO 5 with. It's a mixed compost. And I mean, just from my food scraps and the solids from these vinegars and stuff, you know, I made like a whole truck bed full of compost. And I just
Wow.
top dressed my veggie garden with all that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, so really we have 3 steps to using that plant. I mean, you know, there is no waste. You know, waste is a human design flaw. In nature, there is no waste. It's a principle I take seriously.
That's beautiful. Good job.
Oh, thank you. You too. I love what you're up to. These clay balls have me fascinated.
Oh, I'm going to send you some. I'm going to send you
Great.
some, and I want your feedback on them. They surprise me all the time. Yeah.
So where did you get the inspiration for that? Was that?
Well, I'm still everybody, I'm still planting out there. I'm still going to be working on this video, which is full disclosure, but I might as well take this opportunity to do it. I mean, the recipe for the fermented clay comes from the green book, the Swarm book, right?
Okay.
Smarm or whatever.
Right.
So basically that's going to give you the basic fermented clay recipe. And then I took that further and added, and did the bokashi from that. And I also actually will take that opportunity. I'll send you some of this too. This is the bokashi from the same inoculant. So everybody can do it. I still think we should be supporting each other in economy. So please do still buy my balls, but make your own as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll buy
but
some.
Yeah, I got the recipe from that. So it's like, you know, it's a whole process. So you're utilizing pond water, and I mean, I'm throwing a bunch of stuff in there. Like I'm making sure that I'm getting into that biofilm in the pristine pond areas, and just trying to capture as much of that strata as I can. And what I'm just talk about this sort of crosstalk that happens when we get involved with these natural systems, and how our intuition works, and how, you know, I mean, natural farming really does bring forward this ability to communicate with nature in ways that we're not used to, right? So just working with these balls and working with the facultatives and the anaerobic bacteria, I'm looking at the entire world differently. Like I'm seeing everything from the clays, the salts, the silts, all the way up to the layers of facultative, into the aerobics, and into those top layers, and into the trophic layers of insects and animals and plants, and then like trees and clouds and sky. Like we're all in these it's a stratification, and like we're all this crosstalk going on all through that system. And there is no waste, and we are a part of it, a part of nature, and there's just this infinite level of communication that happens all the way from the clays to the clouds, and then a circular motion all the way back through. So anyway, that I sounded stoned just now. But it's just these balls, working with these guys, working with the facultators has taught me so much about the layers, I guess, the stratification, the way nature, the way life evolved, the way life evolves from clay, the way we come from clay,
right?
And the way that's the amplification moment. That's kind of the moment when clay becomes food, and there's this like amplification that happens from there. And if we can start riding that wave and helping that amplification to happen, then we start to see this regenerative cycle start to happen.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I love that. It's great. Very cool.
Yeah. So I learned this in this book. Huh?
I haven't experimented with the clays, or Yeah, there's some really cool stuff in that SARM book I've been checking out.
Yeah. And I think as a community, if we're playing, let's be transparent about it all, and supporting of each other. So yeah, I'll send you some of these, and I'd love to hear back what you end up doing with them.
Great.
They're so
Great.
easy. You can just, like,
Nice.
in the reservoir, you just drop them in. You don't even have to aerate. I mean, I love the anaerobics
Wow.
because they're very low like low maintenance.
Nice. So where
And they're
are you
actually
getting?
cleaning my pumps.
Wow, really? Are you
Yeah.
getting the clay? Are you getting the clay from the pond too, or where do you harvest your clay?
No, I'm actually working with different kinds of clay right now.
Okay.
I think every clay probably has a different quality.
Mhm.
This particular clay I'm getting from an area that's has been extremely active. Like you can find dinosaur bones in this canyon. Like
Nice.
I think the clay is pretty phenomenal. It's a red clay.
Oh, nice.
But yeah. But I'm
I have
kind of experimenting with greens and white clays right now too.
Oh, cool. Yeah, there's a lot of gray clay along the coast. I found, big sections of gray clay, so it'd be fun to experiment with
Yeah.
that.
Oh yeah. And Jess, I know when she did some fermented clay, she got a lot of the purple sulfur loving stuff. So
Oh, nice.
but I didn't get I don't know. Leighton's gonna help me figure out what's in these.
Great.
But
Great.
I mean, talk about observation being a guide, like just understanding that this clay is an insane food supply for insects informs me of what kind of anaerobes we're dealing with, and that there's actually a natural source of chitin
Ah, yes.
from the anaerobic community.
Oh,
So we
really?
don't have to
Interesting.
yes.
So I don't need to go
Which,
collect crab shells from the beach and do it
uh-uh.
Jadam style liquid ferment.
No, I think it's simpler. I think you can get it in
Wow.
clay.
Wow. Cool. I like that idea.
Right? I know.
Yeah,
So
I've been
yeah.
I have done some of the Jadam style, like the chitin with crab shells,
Yeah, what was
fermenting
been
that
your
down.
result from that?
I really liked it. Yeah, I found it to be very effective, and just I always joke with Jadam. It's like, yeah, just toss it in a bucket of water with leaf mold, and and you're good.
Exactly.
From human waste to from food scraps to plants to shells to whatever. I mean, that's kind of the approach.
Yeah, it's
Just
kind
let
of
it
the
break
approach.
down. Yeah.
Yep. Let nature do it.
Right.
Oh, so cool. All right. Well, I have a huge package to get off to you. It's going to include some of the lettuce.
Awesome.
Oh my God.
I can't
And
wait.
it's gonna have clay balls in it. And I promise you, I'm gonna
Great.
get that off today. Actually, today I'm gonna do that for you today.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm stoked.
Is there anything else that we need to cover that are in your notes, or anything else you want to talk about as we kind of wind down?
While we're on the wedding agent,
Yeah.
I would like to talk about real quick. I mean, pretty much covered what I wanted to as far as plants and wildcrafting and kind of mixing Jadam and KNF both. If anybody wants to add some questions on any of that, we could take some questions. But
Yeah.
while we're kind of talking about Jadam wedding agent, there's so many uses for this. It's a surfactant. It's a wetting agent, so you can put it in your reservoirs to help with the lateral disbursement of feeds in your soil. It's a surfactant, so you can use it in your foliar sprays to help as a carrier to carry some of these herbs and other additives, sulfur or what have you. Mineral sands are also good to intensify insecticides in you know, in this
Oh,
horticultural soap. But I'd like to share
wow.
this. So I've been making a lot more biochar. This last couple of years, been doing a lot of biochar. Super stoked about biochar. I think it's
Ah,
it's
yeah.
um, it's the best amendment you could put in the ground, especially when you charge it. And I feel like Korean Natural Farming has amazing tools. So does Jadam for helping to charge biochar. So I know this
Mm,
wasn't scheduled in for the subjects of talk on this specific talk, but
yeah.
one other application I thought was really cool in regards to biochar was, so I was in Bend. I was doing a burn in Bend at a friend's farm. I was being consulted to make some biochar, and we had 4 acres of hemp residue, this massive pile of hemp. And so we dug this huge pit, and you know, like 10 guys from the neighborhood came over, and we started a fire, and we're just, you know, chucking big trees of, you know, hemp trees into this fire to keep this fire fed. And we burned all the way through the day, and then it, you know, it got dark, and so we were burning a bit into the dark, and then the fire department showed up, and they're like, you guys can't burn into the dark. You're like, you're good, you're on ag land, like you dug this huge pit, you guys are all good there, but like you just can't burn into the night. And we're like, okay, we'll put it out. And then he kind of, like, the firefighter laughed at me because we have this huge pile, like this volcano of, you know, biochar that's still smoldering. And
Yeah.
so I'm out there with a hose, just hosing it down. And he said, he mentioned, he's like, well, just use a wetting agent, go get some dish soap. And it like triggered in my mind. I was like, yes, that's it. Because when you're trying to extinguish a pile of biochar, like
Yeah.
first of all, that's a big pile like that, there's evaporation happening, but a lot of it's going straight down. Whereas like if you add, so what you can do is add some of the wetting agent to that water that you're quenching your biochar with, and it's going to help extinguish that better because it helps with the lateral disbursement rather than just going vertical down. So you can put out a fire a lot easier.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
I bet it has a quality too. I bet it kind of helps with the penetration. I bet it helps with the inoculation. I'll bet it has qualities.
I think so too. Yeah, I'm continuously amazed at all the applications for wetting agent.
Yeah.
I mean, household uses too, but in the garden, it's amazing. So I thought that was really
Very,
cool.
very
I was like,
cool.
yes, of course. Like you can use JWA like to extinguish biochar too. Because I mean,
That's,
we literally had a sprinkler on our this massive pile of biochar, 4 acres of hemp that was reduced down, and I had a
wow.
sprinkler going all night, and and you know, it was still smoldering the next day. So, you know, we weren't super efficient. Some of it went to ash. You know, if you don't put it out, it
Yeah.
just goes to ash. You know, you don't sequester that carbon. So
Yeah.
I was really stoked on just, you know, that idea of adding the wetting agent to quenching, you know, the fire.
That's gorgeous. Thank you for that. I'm because I learned how to do biochar from you. That video you put out on Facebook. The next day I was out there making biochar, and I'm like
Nice,
a fiend
nice.
at it now. So yeah, I make
Yeah,
so now even in this product now it's all my own biochar, and it's hemp, and
nice.
it's all the sort
Great.
of stems from last year's harvest, like orac. I do a lot with orac,
Nice.
and I've been putting out the fire using rice hull. So I'll
Okay.
get a huge container of rice hull. So as I'm burning the fire, and I'll start with the big pieces first, and then I
Uh-huh.
go to the smaller and smaller, and I'll suffocate the fire as I go with the
Right.
with the rice hull.
Right. Okay.
So it's literally made the biochar at the end is probably at least a third rice hull in addition to everything else.
I see. So you're not quenching with water then?
I am at the very, very end, but I'm
Yeah.
definitely quenching as I go. So I'm not having
Yeah.
to do that major work at the end of putting it out.
Yeah. Right.
Like
Right.
it does do the work of suffocation as it goes. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. Very
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll have to try that with the rice hulls.
it's cool.
You know, that's rice hull biochar is some of the most ancient biochar. I mean, I think different cultures across the globe are making biochar out of.
Oops. Where'd you go? Is it me? That might be our end. How's it? Is everybody else still getting reception, or did we lose Preston? We certainly got a lot of information in this session. I'm sure we're going to be talking to Preston again to share. And the sooner that we can get, yeah, he went. The sooner that we can get together as a working community actually doing the work of regeneration, the sooner that we can, I believe we can restore our planet in a matter of, I used to think it was 7 years with permaculture. I believe that we can, if we all do a concerted effort, we can do this in 3 years. And Preston, with his earlier part of this talk, talked about how he remediated his property that was basically caliche and hard clays in a matter of 3 months using a mixture of lab and JMS. So I'm super excited about the talk that we just had, and I'm definitely going to be getting this live to you all on Facebook and Instagram. So if you missed anything, you can join. Wood shavings work like the rice hulls? Sure. I mean, but I like the rice hulls, especially for so many reasons. It has the silica in it, but also just the shape of it is, I don't know, there's something just aesthetically beautiful, and I think aesthetics and function go hand in hand sometimes. That little moon shape that it has, I think, is just it's good for aerating the soil and all kinds of things. Here, he's coming back. Let's say good. Let's get him back. Happy midsummer from Sweden. I'll be rewatching. I'm so happy to see you here. Hi, Monica.
All right.
Yay.
I'm sorry again.
I was so sad to see you. I was like, oh. Well, I told everybody we're going to have another one of these conversations, though.
Okay. Yeah, we will. Well, I mean, it's just signaling the height of the solar day here. You know, us being on the eve of the summer solstice. My phone just turned off from heat temperature, so I think that's a sign.
Hilarious. So do you have any ceremonies planned for this evening, or any kind of special?
Well, tomorrow just happens to be my birthday, and
happy birthday.
Thank you. Happy birthday to you. I know you just had one. I know we're.
You know what's funny? I have to tell you something. You know that night we met in the alley when we were in Boise?
Yeah.
Are you going to go this year, by the way?
You know, I would like to.
Yeah.
You know, it's possible to make it. What is that? October?
It's August. End of August. Yeah.
Possibly, if I can sneak away. Yeah, I would love to.
That'd be cool.
I would love to. That's always such a good
I'd like
time.
I'd like to find a way to see you again or visit anyway. But like that, so that night, I did a poll downstairs in the basement of that dinner to find out how many Geminis were in the room. And do you know, of the soil stewards, probably more than half of us are Geminis.
Really? Wow.
Isn't that weird? Like, I think
weird.
Geminis tend to be natural farmers for some reason. It seems to suit us.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
Anyway, happy birthday, fellow Gemini.
Thank you. You too. Thank you. You too. And happy solstice. We're right on the eve and fire ring eclipse too. So that's really powerful as well.
Powerful.
So speaking of fire rings, somebody just asked about making biochar in a fire pit. And yeah, you can make biochar in a fire pit for sure. I make it.
That's how I do it.
Yeah, likewise. You know, I've made it in little hibachis, you know, little barbecue hibachis. I did a demonstration in Hawaii when I was there, and did it in a little hibachi. It was all I had, and we made biochar on a real small scale.
Yeah.
But that fire pit is essentially, I use really like archaic technology. I love like archaic technologies. And so like, I'll just dig a pit. And so this is like the Kontiki kiln, which essentially you can just dig a pit in the ground to do biochar. And then the specific angle, really works with the thermal dynamics in producing it, in a very, in a method that's very efficient.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
And
yeah, to answer
controllable.
that question, absolutely, you can make biochar in a fire pit. It's really basic. It just comes down to pyrolysis. You need a really hot core, and then you want to reduce oxidation. So anytime you're seeing white ash is when you want to feed that fire fuel. So you need a really hot core, and then you need to continuously feed that fire. And like you were saying about the rice hulls, almost put it out. So usually you start with, bigger fuel, and then you reduce that to smaller pieces and kind of almost suffocate it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that you're sequestering that carbon, because if you're seeing smoke, you're not burning efficiently. You're releasing carbon, and those volatiles off.
Yeah. And then, getting to that point where it's hot enough not to see smoke. And then every time you see ash is when I take basically a handful of char and I throw it right at that spot. And then if you're just like managing the white ash at that point, then you can really control how much, you can keep it a pretty efficient production of char.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it got kind of tricky on a large scale when I was, that burn I did in Bend, where we had the 4 acres. I mean, literally we had 10 guys throwing, hemp trees on that thing. And it was like, talk about like feeding a dragon. That thing was insane. So, yeah, it was,
Yeah.
we could have been more efficient. There was definitely some oxidation. We were seeing like some white ash, but we also, at the end of that burn, we had, I think we got about 4, F-150 truck beds of biochar from that burn.
That's gorgeous.
So we inoculated that, charged it with JMS, Jadam microbial solution, seawater, and some humic acid before applying that out to the fields.
Did you let that sit, and did you do it to saturation, basically?
Yes, definitely. I'm a big proponent of being patient with your biochar. There's kind of some different information online about charging. I think charging biochar is one of the most overlooked things with biochar. Like, there's a lot of biochar out there for sale, and it is not all created equal. Charging is like really crucial, because if you don't charge your biochar, you're essentially putting out a carbon sponge that's going to leach up any nutrients in your soil, and that might take years for it to charge. It's going to rob those nutrients from your plants. So charging is absolutely crucial. I think it's even some of these bigger companies that are using like fish hydrolysate. I don't think that's a good way to charge biochar. I was privy to be part of a interesting conversation when I was in Hawaii, and I was sitting with Master Cho, and this guy came to the workshop who was making all this FAA, fish amino acids, and he was kind of using this method that was not like the way Master Cho teaches it. Essentially what he was doing was filling buckets with fish, and then actually adding some water in there, and then capping it with sugar. So he wasn't equally using, fish and sugar together. He was just capping it with sugar, and had this. So he brought like a sample of this stuff, and it was super watered down, and it was really funny, because I'm sitting there with him and Master Cho, and Master Cho's granddaughter is translating for him, and so just the expression on his face when this guy showed his the biochar and his the FAA was super you know, watered down. And Master Cho was just like, no, 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 no. Like, you need to layer this with sugar. And, but then he was talking about charging the biochar with the the FAA that he was creating. And Master Cho was like, no, 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 no. You're not going to get like a good enough spectrum of microbes from using like fish emulsion or a fish product charging your biochar. So
Yeah.
this is where like IMO really comes in, because you have this like broader spectrum of microbes, you know. And so I love adding biochar to making IMO 3 piles. I find that's a really good approach to starting that process of charging. But yeah, I'll generally let my biochar, I like to make it in the burn months, you know, because right now, like, burn season's over. It can't even burn right now.
Yeah.
You know, it's really sensitive here in Oregon, California. And so I'll make it in those burn months, and then I put it in barrels, and I make my JMS, my IMOTs, liquid IMOTs, and charge it for 2 to 3 months. I think it's necessary to charge biochar.
Nice.
I'm not somebody who thinks you can just like charge biochar in a week. And there is some information out there, you know, saying stuff like that. So I think it takes time.
Yeah. So I was listening to some of Master Cho's lectures, and I kind of pulled a soil recipe, and he mentioned that he was treating the biochar with vinegar, and you know, biochar is naturally alkaline.
Right.
Do you ever do any? And I kind of figured out what it would take to get it to about a 6.8 or something. Was about an ounce of vinegar to saturated char. So that's kind of what I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I do that even before I charge it. Are you finding that the alkalinity? Do you have any insight into that?
Well, one thing to add is one of the byproducts of making biochar is what's called wood vinegar, which is being used. It has some really interesting, some research is being done, and it has a history of being used in Japan and elsewhere.
There you go again. I guess there's a saturation point for shared knowledge. Okay. We should have taken that opportunity to say goodbye. This is going to be fun. This is going to be fun. Can talk about, so there was a question about talking about fermented seawater on the coast. So I'm not able to utilize real seawater, so I end up using sea salt a lot. And my fermentations, hey, you're welcome. It's really nice to see you all here. And so yeah, my fermented seawater takes the form of just adding, you know, following the recipe that I have and leaving it for 24 hours. But I'm sure that Preston would have something different to say about fermented seawater. So we'll get some information. Well, at the next conversation, I'll put a note in to talk about, or some of you coast dwellers will talk about seawater. Chris might have some insight to that too as well. So we'll get some information out. It's been really fun, you guys. I'm really enjoying these Friday sessions, and get in touch with me if there's anything you want to know about, or if anybody wants to come on and talk about their experiences, or, you know, I just feel like this should be a platform for us to have conversations and really have conversations about the things that are really beginning to matter in our world. Like, I'm just coming into this awareness of what's actually happening with the plant's immune function and our relationship with the microbial world, including the anaerobics, right as the coronavirus is coming into our awareness. And there's just such a disconnect between what's really happening in our world and how it's being interpreted for us as far as policy. And in trying to isolate us. So I feel like these platforms are really important because we need to be able to come together and talk openly and free source about these things. So we're going to go live one more time, and we're going to say, probably let this be an opportunity to say goodbye, and we will see you again soon, probably. We're connecting back. Hi again.
Hello. I'm so sorry.
No, hey, it's the way it is.
I'm sitting in the shade now because I keep getting temperature. Like my phone keeps dying from temperature. It's getting so hot.
Wow. Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule and doing what you're doing to share so much information, Preston.
I'm happy to. Thank you for having me here.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure, for sure. I love the open source community in natural farming and permaculture and really herbalism too. So yeah, I think it's a really beautiful thing to have people share their experience and support, and I just want to continue doing so in this beautiful community that we all are in.
Yeah. And somebody did ask about seawater. Fermented seawater. Do you have any insights to share real quick before we say goodbye on that one? Or
well, yeah, I have been doing fermented seawater and I love it. I did get these like blooms of like purple bacteria from my seawater. So I think I am getting some photobacteria in my seawater. So that's really exciting. So anyways, the seawater that I'm adding to my my feeds is fermented seawater, and I love it. I think it just micronizes everything down. You get a nice array of some just another layer of microbes, from the sea. So you're adding more diversity from that biology from the ocean, mixing that with like your IMOs and your facultative anaerobes, and just creating more diversity, which is the name of the game for me, right? That's how nature works. Diversity is king.
Yeah.
There is, if we have time, there's
we have so much time. You go.
Okay. So I guess like I was talking about kind of jumping all over the place. I apologize.
Okay.
But earlier I was talking about like mixing Jadam and KNF. And so the major differences in the approach of the two is that with Korean natural farming, you are actually relying on the resilience of your soil, building your soil, and the immunity of your plants. So it's preventative measures. Whereas Jadam, you have this whole arsenal of pesticides to use, and Jadam has a protocol where you on a regular basis you are applying the pesticides, whether or not you're seeing any problems. You're always applying the pesticide in intervals. And so if you're mixing Jadam and KNF together, you can't really be spraying. For me, it's still a matter of preventative measures, and I'm only spraying bay laurel and other pesticides only when I have problems. Because if you take a Jadam approach to KNF, there is a clash in where those regular pesticide applications are going to affect those the beneficial biology that you're building in Korean natural farming. This is something I had a direct talk to Young Sancho from Jadam about. And so I was asking him about the connection of the two, Korean natural farming and Jadam. And so that was a concern that he mentioned, was that the application, say sulfur, things like some of those, different pesticides that you can make in Jadam can have an adverse effect like on your beneficial biology. So, so my approach mixing the two,
we're so resilient. We just keep coming back. I need to learn about this. I haven't even read the Jadam book yet, so I'm fascinated by what you're talking about. I have so much to learn from you. So let's go just back to that real quick, because I
got cut off right when I was trying to make a point about about using the two. So really you can't take, like, if you're doing Korean natural farming with IMO and lactic acid bacteria and all these beneficials, a regular application of like sulfur or even something like bay can really have an adverse effect on that. So anyways, I'll only use that for preventative measures,
Perfect.
and I'm not
Perfect.
doing a regular spray.
Perfect. Perfect.
Because Jadam does, the protocol for Jadam is you're spraying some of these pesticides whether you're seeing any problems or not. That's kind of the difference there.
So what did he have to say when you were talking? So was he supportive of this kind of hybrid approach, using Jadam and Korean natural farming? When you had that conversation, was that a supported?
Yeah, you know, there's kind of been rumors flying for a while, and you know, Jason Riesling, I'm talking to him about this, but the you know, Cho Han-kyu and Cho Young-sun, like combining their practices into one. I don't know if that'll ever happen or not, but because the father took a different approach, and so has the son, and he's kind of off
Yeah.
on his, you know, and Master Cho says that Jadam is the future now. So I did get some positive feedback when I talked to Cho Young-san about mixing the two, but that was the biggest concern that he had, was that, you know, using the IMO and lactic acid bacteria along with some of these pesticides, you know, those pesticides can have an adverse effect on that. So that was the biggest concern that he brought up with that. But yeah, he did seem to think like, you know, I use Jadam microbial solution in tandem with IMO, and I have a protocol of how I do that. I'll apply Jadam microbial solution, which is more of a facultative, slightly more anaerobic, and I'll use that for that deeper soil horizon, you know, where there's no oxygen, and that really helps to break up hard soils, clay, rock. Whereas then I'll come back, you know, with IMO and apply that just for the topsoil, you know,
Yeah,
right
and I'm the kind of the same way, because I've got hard clays too. And I'm finding, are you finding this to be true? Like, once I started bringing in the facultatives through it seemed to support the fungal growth from the more aerobic. Like it seemed to give this kind of foundational support, and I got much like more vigorous growth from the fungi that I was getting from my IMO piles than before. So I feel like there's some function that's allowing them to be extremely cooperative.
Yeah, definitely. I agree, and I'm seeing similar results, you know,
Oh,
using
cool.
the JMS. It could have to do with, you know, the JMS going in, doing the job first of breaking apart clay, you know, micronizing down some of that into available minerals, and then the IMOs are feeding on that.
I think so.
Yeah. So you know, and this to me is just it. It shouldn't be this battle of you know, aerobic versus anaerobic, and you know, they're both necessary in nature. There's no discrimination between the two. They both have roles within nature. So within
Yeah.
the farm, within our gardens, they both have a role as well.
Yeah, I so agree.
And
I so
finding that
agree.
balance is the tricky part, but
Yeah.
it's doable. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. I think
That's beautiful. And I also feel like some way, like I can't believe how much food this provides for like, let's say earthworms. And earthworms eat fungi, like left on their own, they're going to eat all the fungal growth that you have. So maybe also a function of this, this breakdown of our clays into food are actually, just like we're starving and our world is starving through this kind of, you know, disruption, that maybe the facultatives are giving these insects the food that they need to kind of let the fungi do what they need to do. Maybe it's even just as simple as that.
yeah,
That
could
we
be.
just, we need to remineralize, you know, not only ourselves, but our
Right.
insect world as well.
Right. Yeah, and you're working with the clays, doing a lot of that, so that's great.
Yeah,
Very
so
cool.
how fun, man. Anyway, so let's take this opportunity, I guess, even though I don't want to say goodbye.
I know. I'd love to talk all day, but yeah, it was tough for me even to get away. I got to go help put in some drip line on our
Yeah,
farm. So,
yeah.
um,
Well, I
but
appreciate the time you took.
yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on and sharing. And just want to say much love to everybody out there, the natural farming community, and happy solstice to everybody. Happy summertime.
Yeah, yeah. And get out there and do something, guys. Just make sure whatever it is, take this information and if you've learned something new, apply it.
Absolutely, yes. And remember to be reverent and respectful with your wildcrafting.
Beautiful message. Thank you, Preston.
Thank
See
you,
you
Tina.
soon.
Peace. See ya.
Peace. Bye. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining, and we'll make sure that this gets shared on all platforms. And please do go on. I've got my store listed online. Go and purchase some balls. They're only $6 a piece. This is going to be offered soon. I've got bokashi now.